Let's kick off this explainer with something I guarantee you've experienced. Back in 1985, industry pioneer Joe Harless nailed this incredibly relatable, borderline comical demand that learning and development pros hear all the time. A client walks in and basically says, "Give me a widget appreciating course," right? It's the ultimate trap. The client brings you a predetermined solution, usually a shiny new course, for a problem that literally hasn't even been diagnosed yet, instantly turning you into a reactive order taker.
And this right here perfectly captures the paradigm shift we're diving into today. Look at the difference. The standard order taker says, "Sure, here's a course." But a true performance improvement consultant says, "Sure, what would authentic practice look like?" It's a total game changer. You're moving away from just blindly building what you're told and stepping up to actually diagnose the root cause of the business problem.
So, welcome to our explainer on Guy W. Wallace's transformative frameworks. If you don't know Guy, he's an award-winning practitioner who spent over 4 decades perfecting methods to get you off that reactive hamster wheel. We're exploring his concept of the golden path, which is all about putting performance requirements first and learning interventions second.
We're going to break his methodology down into 5 key parts: the training request trap, the L&D pivot point, the 12 performance enablers, facilitating master performers, and finally, uncovering the thought flow.
Okay, let's jump straight into part 1, the training request trap, and how to avoid those reactive habits.
Wallace has this brilliant concept he playfully calls Sneaky Trick 62. The rule is simple but crucial. Never push back on a client's request. Seriously, if you ask them, "Hey, are you sure this is actually a training problem?" they're going to get defensive immediately. They know pushback when they hear it. Instead, you accept the order, you nod, you actively listen, but you use clever questioning to clarify what they want and subtly pivot the whole conversation toward actual performance.
And here is the exact question you used to do that. What would authentic practice look like with reinforcing and corrective feedback? It's basically a Trojan horse. It gently steers the client away from demanding a generic knowledge dump and forces them to think about what the employee actually needs to do on the job. You're basically asking, if we train them, how do we measure if they're doing it right or wrong back at their desk?
Once you've clarified that initial request, you hit part 2, the L&D pivot point.
Now remember, we didn't push back. We took the order and started our intake process. But we're doing this so we can run a rapid performance analysis behind the scenes. The whole goal here is to dig past the surface-level symptoms the client complained about and uncover the true root causes. We have to know for sure if a lack of knowledge or skill is actually what's breaking the workflow.
Then, you bring that data to a project steering team gate review. This is such a smart move because you're empowering the stakeholders with real data to make a real business decision. You give them 4 options. Kill the project because training won't fix it, modify the approach based on the new data, defer it for later, or approve the plan and hand over the resources. The choice is totally theirs, but now it's actually informed by reality.
But that begs the question. If your data shows that knowledge isn't the problem, what is? That brings us to part 3, the 12 performance enablers.
Enter EPP, or Enterprise Process Performance Improvement. Wallace uses this diagnostic framework to deliver a massive reality check. Listen to this. Knowledge and skills are only one of 12 distinct variables required for optimal performance, meaning L&D only owns one tiny piece of a giant 12-piece puzzle.
You can cleanly split these into environmental enablers and human enablers. You've got data, tools, budget, and culture on one side. On the other side, knowledge and skills is just sitting there next to physical and psychological attributes. When you lay it out like this, it makes it painfully obvious that a shiny new training module absolutely cannot fix a broken software tool, a non-existent budget, or a highly toxic culture.
So, to figure out where the true gaps lie across those 12 enablers, you have to talk to the people doing the work flawlessly. Let's look at part 4, facilitating master performers.
Wallace is a huge advocate for the facilitated group process, or FGP. Usually we do one-on-one solo interviews, right? But Wallace says you've got to get a diverse group of master performers in a room together. The synergy is incredible. One expert's memory jogs another's. They debate, they clarify, and as a group, they naturally self-correct all the personal biases and blind spots you normally get when you just interview one person at their desk.
And overcoming those blind spots is absolutely critical. Check out this mind-blowing research from Dr. Dick Clark. A staggering 70% of an expert's decision-making knowledge is entirely non-conscious and automated. Only 30% is conscious. Think about driving your car. You don't actively think about the micro movements of the steering wheel. You just do it.
Experts operate the exact same way at their jobs.
Which creates a massive hurdle for us. If you sit down and ask a single expert how they do their job, they literally cannot tell you the whole truth, because 70% of it is buried in their subconscious. So if they don't even know what they're thinking, how on earth are we supposed to build training for a novice?
We have to actively extract how they think, and that takes us to our final section, uncovering the thought flow. We have to draw a hard line between overt behavioral tasks, the stuff we can clearly see them doing, and covert cognitive tasks, the invisible thinking going on inside their heads. Wallace's method uses those visible tasks as an anchor. Once we nail down the step-by-step of what they do, we use that to systematically pull out the invisible cognitive tasks they're running in the background.
To actually map that out, Wallace gives us this incredibly practical framework called the 3 Ds of thought flow: discriminations, determinations, and decisions. Let's look at how these 3 steps capture expert thinking. The first D is discriminations. This is all about situational awareness. We're figuring out exactly what the master performer is scanning in their environment. What cues are they looking for to differentiate between things running smoothly and things going off the rails? We want to know how they spot trouble before it even happens.
That leads to the second D, determinations. Once they've discriminated a problem, what's next? This is where we extract the strategic options popping up in their head. It's their mental catalog of what-if scenarios. How are they planning to navigate around the barrier they just spotted? We need these strategies on paper so new hires don't have to invent them from scratch. And finally, the third D, decisions. This pinpoints exactly how the expert locks in their final choice. Do they execute plan A to totally avoid the barrier? Or do they have to drop back to plan B to recover because the problem was unavoidable? By documenting this exact thought process, we make sure novices aren't left relying on super costly trial and error out on the floor.
Guy Wallace spent 44 years out in the field refining these exact methods, from navigating that tricky first training request, all the way down to pulling the invisible cognitive decisions out of top performers' heads. This isn't just nice-sounding theory, it's a battle-tested roadmap for actually moving the needle on real performance.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Just because you can build training, does it mean you should? As you step up as a true performance improvement consultant, are you going to keep taking orders for widget appreciating courses, or are you going to use data to solve the real problems? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep focusing on what actually drives performance.